Well, now let me introduce the next guest, and that's Jeff Jordan. And Jeff is doing me a favor by showing everybody how to build in styrene, something that I've never been able to do up to this point. So Jeff, I will turn it over to you, sir.
All right, and this is where we left off last week. Fortunately, we were at the last slide, so I was most of the way through, taking those sides that we'd previously cut and adding the braces. In this case, I've used a strip material that works out as a scale 6" by 9", or I think it's 1/8 by 3/16, and provides me a nice firm support for the corners and the horizontal pieces. And then the one thing you have to think about as you're putting your walls together is how are you going to treat the ends of the walls? There's a couple of different things you could do. You could butt one into the other and then cover that up with a trim stock. You could bevel the ends so that they butt right together. Or in this case, I did something a little different. I actually, as you can see in the middle photograph, intentionally had the two walls just corner to corner, leaving a little groove down the center, which later on I filled with a fine square strip stock, which approximated the way the prototype building was constructed, though more often I would have covered the seam with a flat stock. And then the right-hand photo on the side there shows all the walls assembled and how thoroughly braced the interior is. The one thing you can't see is in the bottom center there, where there is an interior corner. In that case, I had some L stock, and I used that on the inside to make that joint secure as well. The other thing you'll see here in the middle picture is I've left 1 scale foot of the corner stock sticking out, and that was in anticipation of adding separate plastic foundation material. It's a sheet stock that's embossed to look like stone. And also at the bottom edges of the structure, I let the horizontal piece, rather than being flush with the bottom, since it was 3/16 of an inch, there was plenty of it to glue to the wall and have a lip outstanding so that I could cut the strip stock 1 foot tall and then glue it, as you see in the middle picture, both to that lip at the bottom of the wall and the vertical bits. And then there it is in place on the right-hand photograph. And you can see I've just worked my way around using the vertical pieces and the extended base pieces to make it nice and secure. The roof. Well, this is a southern building, and in the south, the raised metal seam roof is very popular. This building has a raised metal seam roof. They're kind of tricky to model until Evergreen Styrene came out with a terrific product. They took their basic sheet material and pre-grooved it and included in the package a very fine strip material. So you can cut the roof to your size, bearing in mind where the vertical seams are going to fall, and then insert the strip stock and with a little plastic weld, glue each of the strips in, give you a very convincing raised seam roof without a lot of headaches. And then in anticipation of the peak of the roof there, you can see that I'm just beveling the edge a little bit to give it a nice smooth joint when I put the top together. This has got a little discussion about painting, though we'll do all the painting at once. The roof was primed with a primer, as we were discussing earlier. The Evergreen Styrene, to paint it, you really need to prime it. It's a very slick surface, even after you've cleaned off the mold release. Paint doesn't stick to it well. And a light coat of primer. I like the Tamiya's primer or some of the rattle cans you get from the hardware store. that are plastic compatible to prime the entire surface and to prime the roof. And so putting the roof together, it's primed, it's painted with what I had was a bottle of flat aluminum paint in the polyscale line. And the chimney in this case was a resin casting that I had purchased separately, and just did a little bit of painting to bring out the detail. You can see it in the little holder there where it's getting painted with just simple acrylic brick red paint. And then I hit it with a diluted white acrylic paint and carefully cleaned off the brick surfaces. Gives you a very effective mortar line. And then you're seeing the chimney in place in the roof, though that's skipping ahead a little bit, because you have to figure out how you're going to put the chimney in there and make it stay. In this case, I had it pretty easy because, as you saw previously, there was a ridge pole in the roof. And so I could simply notch that, and the chimney just drops right in and has a support, so you don't have to worry about, is the hole precisely right? Can I glue the chimney into the hole? This has something underneath supporting it. The porch floor. One of the critical elements of this building is that front porch. And I did not have on hand any scribed styrene that looked like a 6-inch board floor. So I made my own, starting with just a plain evergreen flat stock. I used my true sander just because it gave me a nice square surface to work with, and a little L bracket, and using the scale ruler, marked every 6 inches, and then came back with a square and a nice sharp X-Acto knife, scribed the lines every scale 6 inches, not bearing down too much, just enough to give you a nice square scribe line that doesn't cut through, but is distinctly visible when you're done. And again, as you can see in the next two photos, using that same 1/8 by 3/16 material and lots of clamps, glue it down. Again, I'm just using styrene plastic cement and tester's tube cement to lay out the support. And then you can see the next picture left a little overhang in the front, and there it is on the end, right side up. And you can see that the scribing effect shows up very nicely. The one thing it doesn't show too well in this photograph is where the scribe reaches the outside edge. I patiently notched each one of those, so each end, it looks very clearly like it's an individual board. Now we come to painting. As I said, the evergreen styrene needs to be primed. I often prime with a very light primer, a light gray. In this case, I tried something a little different. Since the prototype is fairly weathered, I used a Krylon dark gray primer. As you can see in the right-hand photo, everything is primed there, though I masked off the gable edges and what would ultimately be the porch roof support, so that I could cement to it later and not have to worry about scraping the paint off. But the model gets primed, and then I come back, and the left-hand photo shows the process of painting there. And it's not quite done in that photo, but it's a thinned white acrylic brushed on with horizontal brush strokes and letting the primer show through. You got to kind of get a judgment of how you think it looks, but I like the ultimate finished effect is a weathered paint with a uneven finish showing gray, and then the porch surface is even more gray. There, I use the white acrylic paint, but dry brushed it, literally just taking, the dry brush technique, put some paint on the brush, wipe most of the paint off on a piece of paper towel, and then drag it from the wall out to the front. And as you can see, the finished dry brushing, I think, is a very effective weathered porch deck. Adding doors. You remember from earlier that I had shown how I took the Grant Line doors, added the diagonal stock, glued it into the frame, but one of the centerpieces of the front of this building is that pair of screen doors, and nobody manufactures anything like that I could find. So I decided I needed to make my own screen door. And as you can see from the center photo, I first estimated the dimensions in the upper left-hand corner, and then using a scale ruler, drew those out very precisely to be the guide for making the door, and then using various sizes of evergreen strip styrene, took the verticals and cut them to careful height, and then taped them in place so that I could add the horizontals, making all of the joints, again, with a liquid plastic cement that sets very, very quickly. One thing I did do, since this isn't going to function, is the center there is actually a single piece of plastic, heavily scribed, so you can see the line, but it's actually a single piece, and it helped stabilize the whole thing and put it together. And then you can see there on the right-hand side, the finished effort with the edges trimmed, little door handle there just made from strip stock as well. And then the one other step that doesn't show in this photo, but will show a little later, is I had some mesh screening material left over from a kit for screen door and glued it in place from the back. And one more for tonight. This is adding windows. These are all Grant Line windows. Again, on the right-hand side, you can see the windows and doors have been lightly primed. And then I came back and using the same thinned white acrylic paint, painted everything and let it get good and dry. And I think that's where I stopped this week. And next week, we'll finish up with the final assembly and adding a variety of interesting details, including the signs and other stuff, which, as Martin correctly points out, the building looks very bare until you add all these interesting little details. So that's what I got for tonight, and I'll gladly entertain any questions.
Jeff, I'm a new guy, never done this before. What you showed us tonight, where am I going to have the most trouble?
Similar to Martin's comment, it's making sure you're putting your building together nice and square. Starting off with making sure as you cut out your walls that they are absolutely square, and don't trust the manufacturer's edges to be square. I have found the evergreen styrene sheets that, because they're apparently made from a huge sheet, are cut by some manufacturing process that sometimes is not dead square. So you want to check that it's square, and if it's not perfectly square, before you start fashioning it into your walls, you make sure you're working from a piece of square stock, especially with clapboard siding. You want everything to line up. So look at your sheets side by side and make sure that they all end on the bottom at the same point. Otherwise, your clapboards are not going to line up when you put the walls together. The one other thing that I really need to mention is cutting the openings for the doors and windows, which I showed last week. That really calls for some careful measuring and careful cutting, because if you're not patient and careful in cutting, you're going to end up with all your windows and doors being kind of higgledy-piggledy, not square with the siding. And the siding, because of the horizontal lines, will show very clearly if your windows and doors are square. And so you need to take your time and cut carefully. Though, again, that's one of the reasons I like the evergreen styrene is cutting it as very controllable. You can shave infinitesimally fine bits off using a sharp X-Acto blade, or you can file it with an emery type stick and make very, very fine adjustments, and keep your window or door at hand. Test frequently until you get just that right fit.
Jeff, thank you so much. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing what you do next week.
You're welcome. Thank you.